All right, we're live.
Okay. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Rebel Guru Radio. And I'm here with Jesse, who has some announcements.
The first one is go to rebelgururadio.com to submit questions for future episodes or submit them now in the live chat. We are doing intensives here, and it was a short notice for October. We weren't planning to do October. We have two events happening in October, and we canceled the first one, which is October 9th to the 13th. It's a 4-day intensive, and if we can get 8 people to sign up for the 9th, we will reopen it. So I don't know how many people are out there that want to sign up for that, or if you have friends that...
The problem we're having is it's too short notice for people, and the other events are already filled up, and they're filling, other stuff there. But the short notice is a bit of a problem. So if you want to reach out and we get enough people, sure, we'll do it. But at this point, it looks like it's just too much short notice. So we let the few people that have already signed up, reschedule.
It's only $125 per night. It's $500 total. It's 4 days. I think Wednesday through Sunday.
Worth every penny.
If you're interested in attending, you must call or email us to find out if you meet requirements to attend.
So tight.
I gotta loosen up. I'm nervous.
Loosen up. Why are you nervous?
Because I'm in front of a camera. Okay, so I think that's it. And then the foundation meditation system, 60% off still. But we've added 2 bonuses to it: the ties that bind and the water of life bonus. Water of Life is a additional meditation that's it's really powerful. It's only 15 minutes long, and it takes you from like 0 to 1,000.
True.
The Ties That Bind will teach you about the energy that subtly manipulates your everyday life and how you can take control of it. And it's doing the description for Water of Life. So I think that's it. I already did the description for that.
All right, we good?
Yeah.
All right, we're good. All right. What do we got? What do we
First question is,
today?
what is imbuement?
What is imbuement? Well, imbuement, at least for me, is kind of like when I work with objects and stuff like that by putting in what we'll call as data. So I guess we should back up in order to explain this and how I kind of started to do imbuement. So the imbuement is kind of almost reverse engineering. When I was very young, I would be given objects, rings, watches, mainly jewelry, metal stuff in the beginning. And, I'm asked to do traditional back like in the 80s. Can you do a psychic reading? You get an object that belongs to a person and you give information. Sometimes the object belongs to people that are not present and you give information for whatever you pick up on. And other times that person is there and you hold that object while they're there to dial in. The number one thing is that how is it possible to garner information from an object? There's a spiritual, psychic part of me, and there's the logical part of me, and that was always at odds for me. It was always at odds because, it's like, how is this possible? How is this even feasible? Are you saying that the future is predicted and we don't have a choice in the matter? Or how does that all work? And I do go into all of that, and I break it all down in other modules and stuff, which is, really interesting stuff. But the bottom line is this. The jewelry seems to take on a partial form of information. So I always say that every human being or everything has like a serial number or code that belongs to them, a specific radio channel, if you will, that's unique to everybody else. And the first thing that the object is doing, if it belongs to that person and it's been saturated by their presence, their energy, their frequency, okay, it's mirroring that code, that serial number. So it's used as a form to dial in as a source of garnering information. And in other cases, the other thing to keep in mind is what we call ties that bind. And ties that bind is a module that I teach that explains how energy works in its most fundamental practical levels. And if you don't understand that, then saying that you understand energy is just a crock of shit, okay? You really need to understand what's in foundation, and some of you very well probably already do. But the bottom line is, on the simplest way, is that energy and information are synonymous. They're one thing. And so when you have a t-shirt, that t-shirt that belongs to you is imbued. It's saturated with this frequency of you, the static energy, if you will, an aura range, whatever. If I were to wear Jesse's shirt and put it on for a few moments, I would feel
nervous.
Maybe maybe I am now too. Who knows? Anyway, so I would feel like Jesse. It doesn't mean I would know it's Jesse, but I would feel the likeness of him. So there's a certain amount of data that would carry over. Eventually, within a very short period of time, my energy would wash and dominate over on the shirt, because the shirt doesn't have a very good retention level like metal per se. So that is a form of imbuement. So if you ever wear someone else's clothing, you'll understand what I'm saying. It's this feeling you have of being like they're somehow part of you for a temporary part. Other things are walking into a house and you're like, I really don't like the vibration of this house, and you don't know why, but you just feel it. You just know it. Now that house can be really pretty, really nice, new, whatever. It has nothing to do with how it visually looks. It is the energy that has been imbued into the environment. So you take that feeling on. So if you have people that are more positive, you go in, you feel really good. If you have people very negative, you feel that tension in your body. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to know absolute details. It's just a vibe, a feeling, an instinct, like something's not quite right about this place. A town can have that feeling. So very much from the micro to the very large, the macro, there are variations of imbuement, okay? When I began to understand very young on holding an object that somehow my subconscious would interact with this frequency, this energy, this tone, this vibration, I realized that I was getting not only information from like a cosmic source per se, or something that kind of has these dips and valleys of someone's life. Usually it's the traumatic stuff you pick up on, because that's the loudest psychic impression, and that can be from the future, or it can be from something current, or even from the past. But the object was also retaining a form of information also. It's almost hard to say whether it's the actual object that has the information or partial information, and then it's shared, or you're linking up with I'm imagining a ring, with enough information like a license plate code that you go into this cosmic state of consciousness, this all-knowing state, and you're able to subconsciously draw from that. Thank you. And this is a form of data. Now, when we look at ties that bind, you can have someone who has a pillow. It's on your couch. They're visiting. They're talking to you. High drama. They're fighting with whatever partner they have, and they're twisting the pillow as they're talking, not really thinking about what they're doing, and they're hitting it a little bit, explaining to you what's going on and everything. And they're putting in there unconsciously, because it's so much proximity, their feeling, their vibration, their programming, okay? So when that pillow is left alone on a couch, it begins to saturate the less dominant frequencies and information. It starts to mimic or mirror variations of that. So that energy is there, that data is there. So if somebody were to nap on that couch or something that was intuitive or sensitive, they may end up having dreams that are violent and frustrating and anxiety and everything, because of that pre-programming information, which was unconsciously imbued. Now, as I understood this as I was growing older, I really began to think about experimenting with objects. Could it be possible to force a artificial emotion, an artificial thought, an artificial concept, artificial interest into the object, and it would simply, because it was so like kind of hammered in, versus you just unconsciously have your jewelry on and you just have the vibe on there. So you're talking about something that's like hammered, chiseled in for a program, and then that person puts that ring on. Would that ring emanate through you whatever that intention was? It's almost like it's a song playing around you, or a frequency that's always affecting how your mind thinks. So you could say, I'm imbuing this for happiness. I'm imbuing this for a better sense of instinctual decision making, which we call luck. You can imbue it for, to be more attractive. Now, the question is can that be done? And my answer in my experience is absolutely it can. The thing that I found with it was that if you, it's almost like a recipe that you have to have an idea of what the person is. I always try to scan from a photo, dive into their mind, get their vibe. If the information you put into the object is not necessarily suited about the person, it's like something completely different and they're just wearing it, their energy, like the t-shirt, is going to wash it out faster. If it's more about them and there's less big changes, then it will last longer. It's almost like batteries, I guess, of a charge on how long it'll have an effect. Because you have to remember, you're constantly creating an energy field. You can, curling photography, auras, whatever you want to call it, okay? But it's constantly imbuing on a very low level. Think of it like a trickle charge, the USB thing just slowly charging something. You're constantly washing out that information. So the harder the chisel in there of that concentrated thought, the longer it's going to last, but that depends on the person's energies, highs and lows. Not that I want to pitch, cubes and stuff like that, but one of the reasons I made the cubes the way they were, the Siddhis cubes, is that there's an inner core that I can program intensely, and then I put an outer casing on it, if you will, that's harder, that I find harder to get vibes or to imbue. And so you have this constant core that cannot necessarily be faltered, or at least faltered easily. It's almost impossible to project through there to get it, but it's constantly emanating out because it's got that trickle charge still on a casing that can still take a vibration. It's just that it will be harder to adhere long term. So you have something constant like a beacon inside hitting it. This gives it a very indefinite length of life, in my opinion. But all objects can be imbued. Another way to look at it is, as a lot of people like, when I talk about simulated reality, so I give you kind of another level besides spiritual, because I think they're one and the same, is that everything in reality is simply a series of code that defines its structure, its mass, the way it functions. It's everything. There's rules for every single thing if we live in a digital reality, the matrix. And what you're essentially doing to an object by imbuing it is that you are pushing into it kind of like code, or hacking additional code in the object, like hiding it in there. And it has a life cycle, and it has an effect on consciousness. So if you think about it, it's to say that the human brain uses electrical currents that are organized that produce thought, along with various forms of biochemicals and stuff, and everything is very elaborate. But if you can introduce something in that field that's changing some electrical data for your consciousness, it literally is affecting or changing how you think, and its relationship with you and with other people. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I think the real question is, how do you imbue? Mm-hmm. How do you really imbue?
That's one of the questions.
Yeah. And so now that I've covered kind of what is imbuement, okay, you must be able to get some good, ideas of what you can use it for, I would hope. But imbuement can be very tricky. When you literally are writing data into something or a program, your thoughts must be extremely stable. Your mind must be very silent. Your emotions must be very clear, non-empathetically connected to anything. And essentially, here's the $1 million basic level, is that once you've done that, you can create a feeling that is very general. So this is basic imbuement. Joy, happiness, sadness, and stuff. I don't deal with negative stuff, but just to give you an idea for caution. And you are holding that object, and you are literally willfully feeling that vibration as if you are that person. It's almost like you second coat them like a skin on you, so you feel like them. You're dialed into them. And you feel that joy, that heart connection, that positive energy, that all those things, and you literally fuse it into that. You push it into that just the same way I would hold it to pull out data. I'm forcing that data in. But I hate to put it this way, but I'm essentially faking the data. I'm trying to make it acceptable to the person it's being utilized for. So if I make it for one person and another person wears it, it's going to be a conflict, okay? And it's almost like the energy attacks it to change it. It's just like in Kirlian photography, you can have two fingers and they have this static charge around it. And when the two people don't really know each other, it looks like they're fighting. It's like the static charge is trying to encase all of the other one. It looks like fighting. When they're romantic or compassionate or they really have a good connection, they fuse together and it becomes almost like a connected, more intense illumination of energy. So you have to be sure that you're putting in all the attention, not an iota of your own, okay? But absolutely something that would look like it belonged to that energy frequency. Otherwise, you're pushing out. So that's one. So number two is there's another level. There's probably several levels that I will go through depending on what object I have to work with and what the situation is. But for me, and this takes a bit of skill, is I begin almost like looking at a person's future, just like I'm doing a psychic reading. And there is a kind of knowing that is involved. And when I go into that, it's like I try to rewrite or mimic how much I feel. It's hard to explain. There is a feeling, like everybody has a certain body smell. I hate to say it that way, but everybody has a scent. Everybody has a vibe to them, and when you look at somebody, you go, that's kind of like this person or that person. You can kind of feel it. They feel like that person, not just visually, not just audibly, but feel. So what I'm essentially doing is I'm going kind of deep on feeling their future, and in most cases, I'm attempting to alter that future by suggesting into the data that I'm getting for images, I'm creating an artificial image of scenarios or circumstances about their life that are greatly more positive, and I'm treating that person as if I know as a fact that this is their life, and I'm pushing that into the object. And in a sense, I'm trying to alter what would be the reality path or the predictive future that I'm seeing, because I don't believe anything is written in stone. I believe this is a predictive future. So I should probably go into how that's even possible. And I have a very quick thing, and I covered it as, we have this square table. Imagine you're in a square auditorium, for the sake of, there's no bleachers or anything, just a big empty building. And we're standing there, and we have a Super Bowl, one of these balls that bounce really hard and go all over the place. I don't know if the younger generation knows about those or not. And if I chuck this as hard as I can at the ground, and I ask you, can you walk to any particular part and put your finger down inside of this big building to show me where you believe it's going to come to a stop? The likelihood that you are correct is pretty slim to none, okay? But the question is it possible to predict such a complex thing for our intellectual minds? Would it be something simpler, per se, to say, is it predictable? Most people would say no, but you would change your mind if I said, well, what if we had a computer that was super advanced, super intelligent, super AI, and it could do the density of the ball, the trajectory, the speed, the velocity, the curvature, the temperature of the room, all of these things, and shoots a little laser beam, and it'll say that's where it's going to come to a stop, okay? The question is do we think it would be accurate? And the answer is I think most people agree. Yes, it probably would be under the right intelligence level for the computer technology. So seeing the future, in my opinion, isn't necessarily the future. I believe that the if you want to call it the Gaia mind or the force or the matrix, if you will, is doing very complex variations of what your future will be based on what's happening in your life, who you know, what's going on, what's all these variables to it is assisting in a very complex idea of where your reality is going. So it doesn't mean that it's written, it just simply means that it's predicting in a high level of accuracy, but not always 100%, what that future is. And it's more or less contributing to making sure that that happens. It's almost like little maze guidelines to kind of move you in that direction. And that's when we always say, it feels like something's affecting my life, or I feel like the dough is doing this to me, or I feel like something's kind of maneuvering my life. That's what's going on. It's trying to keep things in a sense, oddly enough, in a organized way. Whether that doesn't mean good or bad for it, it doesn't care about that. It just cares about kind of this path making sense, because it's like balls dropping with all these little metal pins, and they're all coming down. They can't go through one another, so they have to work with one another to get around each other, however it's going to work. Everybody's life is like that, and we're all shuffled together. So your path to whatever it's predicting, it's kind of has to adjust all these other people to accommodate that. So too big of a change makes it very unlikely that you're going to achieve changing your future per se. When I'm writing it in. But if it's done really artfully and creatively, okay, then what happens is it kind of makes sense to slightly alter or move you to the left a little bit more, or more to the right, and then all of a sudden your whole life story begins to change. So that's kind of what imbuement is. Imbuement is there is a very much a feeling that you are separating your everyday conscious mind from your subconscious. And I'm going to be teaching about this in an upcoming class quite extensively. We're going to go into remote viewing and everything. And I'm going to do a big, probably badass class on it. But anyway, so the point is the trick to all of this is to learn to stabilize your consciousness. In other words, I have the part of me that's talking to you guys now, but there's that subconscious part of my mind that's kind of watching what's going on, thinking about some other stuff. And there's a deeper level that I call higher consciousness. And then there's like this final part that's back there. And it's a knowing. Everybody has it. It's an awareness. And that part is connected to the all, to the everything, to the universe, if you will. It's what kind of is this interwoven when we say alla soni, or all is one, or we're all a collective, okay? It's the part that's connected and all that. So what you're doing is you're learning to separate these other textures for consciousness, and they're a very specific feeling when you start to train to be aware of them. And you move them to a side, so you just have this very clear, direct source that's connected to everything. And that is the part that you're working with the most. The second your mind wanders, the second it has thoughts, the second you lose that kind of stability, then all of that collapses into one another, and you no longer can find that pure voice, because it's got all this fantasy mind and babbler and emotional mind all wrapped in there, so you lose its potency and its data. So the idea is to keep all those at bay while you kind of keep this clarity and work with it. Very hard to do, but completely doable. Questions?
I think you talked about it, but someone is asking how long does imbuement last?
How long? It depends on the person. It depends on the amount of time that the imbuement. I look at it this way: if you get an engraving on a piece of jewelry, it's like your name or somebody else's name on there. The engraving for the first year is very deep. Maybe 3 years later, it's a little bit more worn. 20, 30, 40 years, it's very worn. Okay, so there's an eroding process on that. I would say, depending on how deep the cut, that means who's working on it, how good are you, how disciplined, how much rubbish can you hold off while you're infusing this, okay? That's going to decide whether it's going to last days, weeks, or months. A general imbuement, I would say, from a semi-skilled person, it's a twofold problem, because it also depends on the person who's wearing it. If they have a more, how should I say, unlike me, a more relaxed energy, it might last much longer. If you have an energy that is, I don't want to say it's aggressive, but like a strong kind of, which I kind of have, it's going to wear down on it more. It's like rubbing it harder and faster to remove the etching, okay? Mm-hmm. So that's the problem, unless you do something like the cubes, which was extremely cutting edge for its time, is if you accept this kind of thinking with this teaching. Gotcha. So it can last days or weeks or months, just depends. And it depends on the object sometimes, but not always.
This one's a little bit ambiguous, but What is an imbued mystical artifact?
Well, look, almost anything that you have disciplined people working with, if they're using it ritualistically, that thought by default is going to imbue into the object. Even though they're not thinking about imbuing it, it's just like the pillow and that negative energy. If you are going to take an object that is used in a Buddhist temple or Zen or whatever, and it's considered very sacred, people don't get to touch it. Anybody touching it has the same thought process and relationship ritualistically with it. You're constantly re-imbuing it in a way, and it has an intention. You're using it to cut the threads of reality or cutting through illusion or doing something with it. Then you're imbuing that. So what it really comes down to is the complexity of the intellect that's behind it when they're using it. What are they thinking? Just because somebody's a Buddhist or somebody's a Zen master or whatever, it doesn't mean that their mind is always disciplined, that they're going to do like everybody else. I hate to pop the big bubble, but they're automating. They just know the ritual so well that they've lost the passion behind it. Okay, so that means the imbuement that I'm talking about isn't there. It's just them chanting, and it looks really good, it looks really spiritual, it looks very intense, and you're like, but that person's done it 1,000 times, and now they don't even have that something that I'm looking for that becomes part of that imbuement. So it may have been there at one time, but it may be lost, or it may be maintained.
Kimberly asks, you've also mentioned that using a bit of salt to agitate the energy of a metal object can help to connect with the original energies. And then she has in quotations, the eyelets of the little girl's tennis shoes example. Is there an intention with salt that we set to either completely cleanse an area or item versus restore the previous imbuement?
Right. I would say be very careful with using salt when it comes to imbuement. We use salt sometimes to detox negative energy, kind of vibration kind of stuff. Salt, I often say, is like the ocean. When I go to the ocean, my spirituality is good, but it becomes very clear. It's very neutral. Salt tends to neutralize stuff, not in a bad way, not in a good way. It just clears. It's like an eraser to a marker. It just cleans everything on there, but it leaves the board up. So this is why when you go there, you feel very, very kind of almost cleansed, but neutral. It's like a different kind of tired, and it's not necessarily spiritual, but it's kind of spiritual. So when you utilize salt in itself, for whatever reason, it continues to have that property, that vibration, that frequency of scouring, or what we'll say, breaking down the organized computer code. It has a way to make it just kind of want to come apart. Okay, and it depends on, of course, the level of how strong that reality program is. But so sprinkling a little salt on something is maybe okay to kind of kickstart something, to pull out of it a little bit more. But too much salt, you're going to end up erasing more than you're going to have with bringing data up. And when I worked on that case with the sneaker that was brought to me, the thing behind it was that I was having trouble getting a vibration off of the sneaker, because plastic, cloth, rubber, all those things hold a vibration. Just not very good. And in the case that I worked on, it was a very old case, and I just really couldn't get anything from that sneaker up until the point I really realized that the eyelets for the string to go through, we're talking way back machine now, when we had that eyelets to shoes. I guess they still have them. I was able to get data from one or two of those. Like I locked into that, and that's how I was able to get information for them. I don't recall doing anything with salt with it, but I do believe, if I recall right, that they had been in the water or found in the ocean shore or something. I don't remember. No more. It's 30, 40 years. So, yeah.
Kimberly also asks, recently I had an experience where I was able to connect the energy of a person I'd never met before with art I'd seen 2 years prior. Was this person's art unintentionally imbued with their energy, and I simply recognized the person's energy signature without knowing who they are?
Well, this is interesting. It's the same thing with music. For me, I love artists, and I think artists are just another level of genius. And their craft is something that they work with. And when let's say a painting, when they're making a painting, they are imbuing it. There's no question about it. But I would say that energy is going to eradicate very rapidly because of the materials. But some paint, and many, maybe I don't know, maybe there's more to this with paint stuff. But I have gotten energy readings off of paint, literally paint, and I suspect that it has a heavy mineral base in some paints that I'm able to maybe get something from, some other stuff not. It depends. I pretty much can get a vibe off of almost anything. How much information you can get, that's where it gets a little tricky. But here's the thing. I do not think that the painting is what that person got their vibe from. What I'll tell you is, if you ever take your cell phone and you see these codes and they don't look like anything, and you put your phone over it, it's data. It all of a sudden will pull up something that is being sold, or a location to something, whatever. I don't know what that's called, but
QR code.
QR code. It's like, it just looks like a just static, and the computer phone knows what that is. Okay. What I'm suggesting is that some people, when they are in a certain state of consciousness and they got less babbling, less thought going on, and they're pulling maybe from their chest intelligence, you're doing kind of the same thing. You're looking at what that person created, and if they did a really amazing job, there's a whole level, I don't want to say holographic, but it's like there's a whole level of data that your mind begins to mimic, which is a story or what that person was feeling. So every texture of color, there's probably thousands of layers of colors in there. Every curvature, every movement, every kind of heavy dab of paint versus a light dab of paint, the facial structures, all of these things, it's like a symphony of music that's been held frozen. And what you're doing is you're taking this computer disk, if you will, this USB drive of organized data that has absolutely no use, and you're inserting it into your energy field, and like a hologram, it comes alive in you, and you now all of a sudden can feel or see or know things based on that. And that's what I think is going on there. And so, well, a lot of people, I think, are very psychic and they don't know it, but people that particularly what we're talking about painting right now, but this is applicable to a lot of other stuff. They will go in. I think that they feel more and they experience more than other people. The other people going in, they're very flat. They just look at it optically. It's just, this is what it is. It's a bird flying, oh, it's a happy bird. There's a kind of tree there. But when a person paints, they're not just painting a photo. Do you understand? They're going to choose something. They're going to choose something that's moving, and it's like a song. It's like a symphony. It's the only way I can explain it. And I feel it. You know what I'm saying? And I feel it more from some stuff and less from others. But that comes down to how well their mind went in that Zen state making it.
Would that be like considered like decoding it?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But you got to remember, when an artist makes something like that, it's their intention for you to decode it. It's their hope. They want you to experience that experience that they're trying to share with you. It's data, it's knowledge, it's wisdom. And if you open yourself to it, your mind will unfold it in a way, unpack it, and then you experience it as if you lived it to a smaller degree, but you live it.
This other one is a question I asked because there's been times where you've created videos where you've used music, and or just other times where you've shared music and you could feel the music so intensely. Yeah. And I was wondering, can music, even after it's been created, be imbued?
I think music is very much it's I wouldn't say that I've looked into imbuing sound waves, okay? But what I think that music is the same thing as a painting. Do you understand? It's the same philosophy. It's just done in an organized numerical pattern that we consider sound. And when you receive that sound, somebody made it and they test ran it through themselves. We're all biologically the same. So for the most part, we interpretate and feel. We have very similar things, minus, varied tastes as we get older or younger or whatever. So the thing, when you take in music, you're kind of holographically, emotionally, and mentally in most cases visualizing what it is that they're trying to project to you with that story, that information. And they internalize it. They found a way to transcribe it, if you will, and then it's put into a source that emanates for you to take into your ear, per se, and your body vibrational wise. And you get this pattern. This pattern is a computer code, if you will, and it makes you feel a certain way if you choose to allow it to move you, if you open up that part of you.
But can it be amplified through the guy in mind? Like it's already created, but
This is a gray area. It would be hard to say. I'm a lover of music. I'm a lover of just music, period. And let me give you a different example, okay? When you listen to someone like an OPB or something like that, and they're telling a story, if there were no music in it, the relationship that you connect with the story and how well you focus, I believe, diminishes, okay? As soon as they overlay with a musical track, okay, by whatever they choose, they're trying to color the conversation so that your mind relates to it more, and so we find it more engaging, more interesting, because it's making other properties of our mind operate. So if you have conflicting music with a conflicting story, you've got bad programming. Okay, if the music can complement the conversation, you have now a higher level of that person experiencing, relating, and finding a connection with that message or that story. To me, that's a form of imbuement. Okay, it's just that we don't think of it like pushing it into an object. But I think sometimes by having I play music all the time in the house in the background, but I think that music can write its vibration onto stuff. You can get a sense of feeling. I just think it's very different than a direct thing that's designed from a human for another human. Your body kind of accepts it because it understands it's we can mimic the body because we have a body. We know it well. It's just about being very clear when you're trying to embody that. Yeah.
okay.
We've got some questions coming in. Is it the same with similar with the logo? Can you imbue something digital like a website logo? Something like
Anything
that?
can be. This is the difference. This is why you guys staff are like recently we have like a graphic art service we use, and you can pick pictures and store it in there, and you can use it for later. So he's got 1 billion. Everybody, all of us have done different graphic work stuff, and I have also. So we store it under our names or whatever, and mine says "stay out," because they're gonna snag it. They're gonna want to steal my stuff, and I think they're all hoarding, so I can't find anything I like because they're all like, but I have it already.
I see my stuff in yours.
So yeah, well, I said maybe I had mine before you. Who knows? But anyway, the point is that they'll say to me, every picture you have moves you. Every picture, it's just awesome. And they're like, how do you do that? And that's the difference of what I'm trying to say. I immediately recognize that whatever that image is, or whatever that artist for that particular photo or that particular graphic art design nailed the perfect frequency to dial in. And it's not, some stuff works only specifically with some people. The best stuff is the one that works with the majority of people. So when I look at that, I feel whatever that is. I'm scanning the same way with the camera to get that code to tell me what the product is. Do you understand? I'm doing that very quickly in my mind because I'm separating the bandwidth of all the chit chat in my head and all the emotions, and I'm just dialing with an intention. That intention is I'm trying to tell a certain story. I want it to come a certain way, and I'm looking for something that's going to complement that process. And I know right away, boom, oh, that's it. Boom, that's it. And I can do it very quickly. Mm-hmm. Because I'm not letting these other parts. As soon as my mind starts to let those other two go, it's getting late in the day, or I've got distractions because it's hard to separate with all that. Then I notice I'm not making 100% good choices, and I'm like, okay, I got to stop. Okay, so if you guys learn to develop that and you learn to move that the net, so a logo, a graphic art design, anything can have that quality, but it has to be done from the user end first. To make sure you got that formula right, to be intaked visually. And you got to remember that we're seeing reflective light. That's the other interesting thing. So when you see something, you're not necessarily seeing it there. You're seeing kind of an organized a structure that makes us see what we think we're seeing, okay? So when you think of logos, paintings, images, okay, you have to understand that the colors in them and all of those things have a meaning also in your subconscious. And it's reflecting as a form of light still to you. Am I losing you guys? Am I?
No,
should I try harder? Or?
No, this is good stuff. We're just kind of want to spit it out. New questions. So, what do you think about objects that are sold? This is actually a question of mine, I think. claiming to be made of like a special kind of metal that emits energy. I remember before Higher Balance, there was all these things that I found. They were supposed to like emit orgone energy. And...
Look. It's very difficult for me to criticize or to make statement about other objects when I am in that bandwagon selling an object. It's either we say, here, I'll imbue this, these necklaces for you to wear and stuff, or we have the Sidus cubes, which are expensive, but an enormous amount of work. So it's very hard for me to say, well, it works for me, but not for them.
But you're imbuing it. This is just saying it's a metal that's special.
Right. I personally would be very reluctant to accept any of these objects over the internet without knowing the source and the integrity of the person and what you really think if they're really legitimately putting their heart and soul into it. And it's got to have some properties afterwards. If you're not like, there's something funny going on with this thing, eventually 6 months, weird stuff is happening, probably 10 to 1 there's something really legit with. But 99% of everything on the internet, all these things, I just think it's all scammy and manipulative, and they're looking for certain kinds of people to get kind of lured into that. It's not to say that they're all like that. Look, let me tell you, when I get these cores, okay, there are times, and the staff knows, these are all HBI people. They're not, people that don't know or do whatever. They're legitimately, studying all this. And I would have to be really amazing considering everybody's in my house most of the time when I'm working on these things. There's no hiding. But I will put them aside sometimes, and it could take me a month to get to it. Not because I don't want to do it. I want to do it, but I know how spot on I must be, and that person literally is doing an exchange, financially, and I have to respond to that. So I have to be 100%. I can't be 95% or 99%, okay? So I can tell you there are times when I'm just like, oh my God, there's 5 of these to work on. I can't even imagine doing it. But you're thinking, and I'll be honest, well, I got all this money, maybe some shortcuts, and then pay the bills. I cannot bring myself to do that, okay? And I think that a lot of other people, when I started doing these cubes, I realized, how do these people do this, okay? I don't believe that they do. I don't believe I think some people maybe have the discipline, but I don't think they're like me. But I remember in the early day, I was worried people wouldn't necessarily believe I worked on them so long, but remember we filmed it all. Yeah. Hours and days, and I'm just working on these things, and the staff is, where I am, watching what's going on and stuff. So at the end of the day, I just don't like, speaking negatively, because then they retaliate, and they're going to say something negative whether they know any different or not. And I don't know what some of these products are. So
well, what I was saying is, like, these products aren't proclaimed to be imbued. They're just saying, like, it's a special whatever it's made out of. And I think that's the defining difference, is that you're imbuing it.
I do agree with that.
Yeah.
I think that certain materials can have an effect on your energy field. For instance, if we were to take a magnetic object that's magnetized and you went over some kind of illumination spectral whatever, you'll see that it either moves apart. If you go up high enough, the magnetism is drawn it higher. So this tells me with an energy body field that if you have certain metals, that those metals may be to affect your energy field, your consciousness, okay? That's giving them an awful lot of credit. I just don't think you're going to find those things in most cases ever. And if you think you're just going to go online and get one of those things and it's legit, you better think again. I get stuff sometimes and we sell because I just love old Tibetan stuff. So I have to make sure it's legit, it's real. I really check out the people. But at the end of the day, it's probably almost always a recreation. But to me, if it's done in the location in the Tibetan mountains and it has, real legit people working on it and everything, for me to complete that, that's where I'm imbuing the rest of that data.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't want anybody to think that I'm finding something, I'm going to sell you something that's 5,000 years old or 500 years old, or it's made out of a certain special kind of metal with powers. To me, I have not seen something that has that. I'll give you another example. Is I have I don't know how much I should say. I don't want somebody to try to break in and steal my crap. It would be a bad idea. Anyway, I have a sword, and I've had it since I've been very young. And the sword is not necessarily super old, but it's old, and it has some very interesting vibes that I can feel off of it, and it has intention still in there. And the irony is that I've had that freaking sword probably 30 years now, I think, and it still has that vibe, that frequency, although it has diminished a bit over time. So it is emanating an intention out. So is that an artifact? Absolutely, okay? But I don't know. I just think stuff is stuff. It's a sword. And for me, at the level that I'm at, I could probably get a spoon and just imbue it, and the spoon would be more effect on your consciousness or you or on your reality than that sword. So it comes into a lot of things. For instance, let me give another explanation to this. So we're getting kind of technical here now. If you have a spiritual object, somebody was asking about what was it? They were asking about the thunder thing.
Oh, that was me.
Okay, your
the Dorja.
Dorja, and with the Dorja, if it's used in a spiritual sense by Buddhist monks, by their programming, their whatever, the problem, unless you get somebody to kind of work with it, like myself, I guess, but like you guys, if you guys can all learn this, it's not necessarily a good fit. Do you understand? It's in a sense looking for a Tibetan person. You have to understand that your mind works not very differently, but differently than someone culturally who is consciously raised in a different kind of what I'll call a hive, a community. And therefore, that variation, as I said earlier, would not be a very good fit for your energy to say, oh, I'll work with this. Do you see what I'm saying? So this is another problem. It would be probably stronger in somebody that maybe is Asian. They don't have to be Tibetan, but there's a higher chance it's going to cooperate better. Okay? So when I find these objects, I mean, the truth is they're designed to be a certain way. So the real first energy or the real first power comes from that is that object is in the psyche of the Gaia mind, the collective mind, okay? And so there might be tens of thousands of similar variations of that, okay? But because there is a thought and a relationship that's been imbued over time through rituals, through willful mental states, more than just random shit, okay? That there is a collective reaction in the consciousness of the planet to those items when they're used in certain ways. And so therefore it reacts a certain way to that. But it would be more amplified if you fit the rest of the role of what it's looking for a fit, meaning you should be in Tibet, or you should be a Buddhist monk, or you should be doing these. That's when it's going to be done.
Okay, so it syncs up with the music with the art. And,
yes.
Yeah. What was I going to ask?
And nothing is for every single case. I mean, I'd have to look at each situation. I'm just trying to give you guys an overall intellectual understanding of some of these things. It doesn't mean that I would specifically say this is true for every single item, but for the majority, and the majority that people will ever find in their entire life, I would say yes, it's accurate.
Oh, one thing before I go into questions, what I was going to say a minute ago. I've seen Eric walk up to me with his hands after doing Imbuement on course, and they're full of blisters.
Yeah.
How do you get, you're producing so much heat that you're getting blisters?
Yeah. I remember when I worked on one, and I dropped it in the Ziploc bag, and I handed it, and the whole thing just went, and it was just super grayed out. You couldn't see it in there, and it was all moist. I think it was Sean's son or somebody
Probably. Got
that one. Yeah. It was just anyway. But some people would argue, you're rubbing your hand.
Yeah,
and you know how much rubbing
so
that would be.
Much, and it was the next day they were gone.
But I don't like to talk about it because I don't want to be in a position.
I get you. Okay, sorry about that.
So it's people around me can see what I do for these things.
What is your opinion of the crystal skulls? Seems to be a lot of debate over the authenticity of those.
I have a bit of a problem with it.
Mm-hmm.
As spiritualists, I want to believe. I want to. The crystal skulls came from some other galaxy. Of course I want to believe that. And I'm a spiritual person, but I must say to myself constantly, Eric, don't let you go off the crazyville. You got to keep it, check yourself. Try to be sensible and lean more towards science and spirituality, which is already walking a fine line, than this. These are the things I would ask in a practical level. And I'm no expert on these, okay? These were found all over the world, but they're all uniquely different.
Yeah.
And some are cruder, some are more complex. Some are, like the big main one, they're saying, Hewlett Packard at the time analyzed it. They're like, it would take thousands of years to get it this smooth and everything else. Look, if it really came from an alien race, okay, and they gave it to us, why not make them all the same? Why, really, really complex, really cool, put them on, put 13 all over the planet, they're identical. Why make some of them look like it was like, my grandmother who chiseled it all out in a way, but was artsy craftsy still, and then some of them are super high end. I'm just not buying it, okay? If it wasn't an advanced civilization, why give us a skull that's super advanced made? There's so many other things that I could think of to mildly affect humanity in a way, like we're supposed to discover. I mean, who wants to do? If it gets lost, it'll never be found. I don't think as an intelligent species, I'm thinking, well, you're going to find it in a few thousand years or a few 100,000 years. Why would I have something that could break, chip? Why would I make it I would just burn some data into the side of a mountain until they're smart enough to figure it out.
Yeah, and I mean, it was like, what's the application? But I think the person at the Smithsonian said that she believes that it's actually fake, but still it's like a beautiful piece of art, basically.
Well, there's no question it's stunning, okay? Yeah. But I'm just saying that I want to believe. I just am finding a hard time if they were all the same and they were all over the planet, and I think reanalysis should be done. Technology is better. And I think that it should be brought into somewheres like, a very good lab. I forget some of the names of them now, but there's some very good ones. And I would just like to see a modern analysis done just to see what we think today of this. If it comes out the same and they're like, yeah, there's no way this could be done at the time period it would be thousands of years, to do it. Well, you got my attention,
Mm-hmm. Something that was on a podcast recently. Do people?
Well, let's say it was on Joe Rogan. I believe.
You saw it too?
Well, I glanced at it. Look real quick. I love his show. So,
do people or beings who serve the dark side utilize imbuement in their own way?
I think that imbuement is done 24/7 by everybody. If a person can walk into a couch, throw their shit energy on your pillow and then leave, and then that vibe kind of gets, starts to seep into everything because it's an aggressive energy, then negative people are doing it unconsciously, and then you have people who are doing it intentionally. It's when you look at imbuement is one of these things that's a very fine line between programming and the idea of what we'll call magic. Mysticism, spells, this kind of stuff. And I think that magic came about, I think a lot of people had a sense of vulnerability and a lack of power, and so they're drawn to the idea of being able to cast spells and everything, so that's what they do. It's, I think, somewhat of an insecurity of life, not completely. And I think there is a knowing or a sense that objects and things can have a feeling or an emotion in them. And I think that magic is a very crude system of imbuement, but I think it's a far cry from the very, very refined level of what we're discussing now. Mm-hmm. Do you understand? There's too much babbling with it. There's not enough, but it does have an effect. I'd have to say to some level, consciousness has an effect even with magic, okay? But at the end of the day, it's like comparing a car that's made in 2019 to a car that was made in 1820, okay? They're just night and day difference. We as a people, because of technology, because of the internet, because we're sharing stuff, because of TED Talks, because of all these things, okay, we are significantly more intellectualized to reapproach what I would call base phenomena, where science has a little trouble to explain certain things. And it, to me, you know, they were talking about many worlds, I think, on Joe Rogan. They were talking top scientists, okay? Well, because we were talking about this stuff already a long time ago, now they're talking about it only recently. But because they're scientists, there's more things, and respectfully so, and I agree with that.
Skeptical kind of scientists
yes,
too.
Yes. So they're finding what we've been saying. I said this already 30 some years ago on recordings, you know. So the thing is that there is a truth to all this. It's just sorting out a lot of the muckery. And the new way, this is why I hate being involved with the new age. I don't want to be new age. I don't want my name involved. I don't want that. They're too daffy, you know? They're too, just everything's freaking, you know, love energy shit. I believe in love and I believe in compassion. There's no question about that. But I just don't want to run off with that bubblegum new age thing that applies to everything. Like I met somebody the other day, they were out here and we were talking about quantum physics, and they were like, oh, I understand quantum physics. And I'm like, oh, what do you think? Oh, well, quantum physics, you know, she's like a spiritual, is connected to everything and everything is one and blah, 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 blah. And I'm just like, you know, yeah, but that's such an eerie fear. I want to know more. I want to know the deeper aspect. I'm not afraid of science. I believe that science will complement the things that I've come to understand and what I've experienced. I just want to know how it works. Why does it work that way? So when I look at science, I may not look at it purely as from a scientific stance. What I'm looking at it is how does that relate to what I can do, and I may not understand how I do what I do. And this helps with that information. I mean, you kind of pick, but you know, it's, you got to make sure that you don't color too much of your own lower understanding of something to come up with an ideal version of it. Yeah.
I just came to mind. I was thinking about, speaking of love, you make your food with love, and it seems to taste
Not
better.
always. No, I stopped doing that. That's how I got fat. Anyway, I fill it with anger and sourness. You know,
I've heard it. I mean, I've tried it before.
Yeah.
It seems to
it's
taste
true.
better.
It's very true. It's very true. I think thought, conscious, like I always say to everybody, we're in the business of consciousness. Is connected. If everything is a simulation, the matrix, and everything is organized energy, and we're part of that, and if we can self-reflect to some degree, even at 1%, that means that we should be able to hack the system. And that's what all paranormal spiritual phenomena is, bottom line.
Yeah, we can wrap it up.
Okay, wrap up. It's a wrap up.
It's a wrap.
I hope everybody enjoyed today's session. You know, I talk about all this kind of stuff for years. There's some great modules. I would say call the staff and, you know, ask about what, you know, and ask them to give you some material. I have so much material to spin your head, and one of the biggest problems is people always say, where do I begin? And it's hard because I've created so much. There's so much stuff in my head that now I've come up with a very simple way of working with the material. And when I first started back in 2003 with Higher Balance, it was all relevant to what I call the essentials, you know, auras, energy, vibration, frequency, you know, ghosts, spirits, entities. And over the decade and a half plus, you know, I've worked my intellectual side, my scientific perspective, in hopes that people who are not as evolved with that kind of thinking, of course, learn to understand where I'm going with everything, and that's why they have the experience they have. So we're getting ready now to have it set up almost by year when certain materials all came out, and so people can figure out where on that scale that they're going to start to thrive. So if you just want to warm your feet, I would get, you know, the beginning stuff it'll rock your world. If you don't like it, return it. I'll give you your money back. No hitches. If you are, you know, a little bit more advanced, or you feel like, oh, this stuff is not really something I understand it all, I'm looking for something new, then you might want to go for a middle range from that time scale that we're going to list. And if you want something that you want to, you know, intellectually, you know, grab, you know, let's bring it on, Eric, show me what, you know, show me your brainiac stuff. Let's go. It's there. You just get the stuff that I probably did in the last 7 years. and it's simulation theory and before anybody's talking about it, I was way ahead of everybody. I mean, that sounds terrible, but
Well, yeah. I mean, and
but
there's
it's
so much more
documented,
details,
you
too.
know, yeah. But you know, so I'm just kind of putting that out there, you know, and stuff, and I'm getting ready to do a big investigation. I'm going to go on the road and go do this. We're going to film it live and everything. We're getting ready to announce it, but it's like 5 days out. But I'm going to do this incredible, powerful on my drive out there. You know, I've got a lot of time. I'm going to just video record. So if you want good sound, I am not the guy. All my stuff is done like on the fly. No corporate, no screen reading, no sterile environment, monotone. It's the real deal. I say what I passionately am thinking. If you don't mind a car passing by or a dog barking, just like you would sitting out on a stone out in the middle of the field with a teacher, okay, you're going to deal with the cows mooing and everything else, okay? That's the real deal. If you want sterile corporate products, well, I'm not your guy. But having said that, I'm going to put together this kind of really intense remote viewing. It's kind of where we're going to use these people to remote view the locations that I'm going to be at and work on where the most intensity is. So that's all part of this big thing we're doing. But that particular thing is something I think anybody in their right mind would be very interested in. It will be very, very cutting edge at this point.
We'll release
and I'll have nothing to do but to talk, you know, in there. So
yeah.
I'm sure you'll get plenty of data.
Yeah.
So
we weren't planning on talking about it, but since we brought up the Sidus cubes, if you have some material, we probably don't recommend getting a Sidus cube as your first thing that you get, obviously. But if you do have some material, go to Sidus Cube, which is spelled SIDDHIS.
See, I totally want to stop you.
What?
I don't want people to do that.
Okay.
I think it's, you know, you do marketing. I get it,
yeah.
but you know, I have to jump in.
Okay.
Do not get a Sidus cubes. You get a Sidus cube when you're done with all my material, and you want that, and you're ready for that, and you understand it, and you believe that this is going to be something really cool for you. By all means, knock yourself out. But you do not need to have a Sidus cube. It's not. I want people to have Sidus cubes that truly understand what they are for. I just don't want to hand them out like candy, and I refuse to do it.
Okay. Got it.
All right, there we go. Sorry about that, folks. But this is sometimes just conflict, you know. It's just like, you know,
every day.
you know, it's I don't catch always what they're doing, and they put stuff out there, and then afterwards I disagree. But you know, I've got to give them the freedom to make decisions. Sometimes they're wrong, but oftentimes they're right. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Ciao. Listen, subscribe, do all that fun stuff, and you know, a lot of you can find out what we're doing. I'm sure there's going to be some exciting stuff coming up here soon, more than normal if we post it. But yeah, check it out.